A deal sealed with uncertainty, Rebecca Hayes stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite of the Plaza Hotel in New York City, her hands trembling as she adjusted the ivory lace veil for the 100th time. The wedding dress was exquisite, custom Vera Wang creation with delicate beading that caught the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. It should have been the happiest day of her life. Instead, her stomach churned with anxiety. "You look absolutely stunning, sweetheart," her mother, Patricia Hayes, whispered from behind her. But Rebecca could hear the guilt weighing down her words. They both knew this wedding was not about love or romance. It was about survival. 3 months earlier, the Hayes family business, a beloved bookstore chain that had served Boston for 3 generations, had collapsed under crushing debt. Rebecca's father, Thomas Hayes, had made poor investments, trusted the wrong business partners, and within weeks, they lost everything. The banks were calling in loans, creditors were circling like sharks, and bankruptcy seemed inevitable. That was when Patricia's old college roommate, Diane Pierce, reached out with an unusual proposition. Her son, Jonathan Pierce, needed a wife, not for love, but for appearances. At 32, Jonathan was one of New York's most successful real estate developers. But his reputation had been damaged by a very public broken engagement 2 years prior. Investors were nervous about his stability. He needed to project an image of settled maturity. The deal was simple and transactional. Jonathan would pay off all the Hayes family debts, provide Rebecca with a generous monthly allowance, and in return, she would be his wife in public. She would attend charity galas, business dinners, and social events at his side. The marriage would last at least 2 years. After that, they could quietly divorce. Rebecca would receive a substantial settlement. Rebecca had agreed because she had no choice. Her parents would lose their home. Her younger brother, Daniel, would have to drop out of college. The weight of her family's future rested on her shoulders. The wedding ceremony was beautiful but hollow. The plaza's grand ballroom was decorated with thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. 200 guests filled the gilded chairs. Most of them business associates and society figures Rebecca had never met. As the classical music began, Rebecca walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Thomas squeezed her hand gently, and she could feel him trembling. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "You deserve so much better than this." "It's okay, Dad," Rebecca replied softly, forcing a smile. "I'm doing this because I want to." At the altar stood Jonathan Pierce. Rebecca's breath caught slightly when she saw him. He was undeniably handsome, tall, with dark brown hair styled perfectly, sharp jawline, and intense green eyes. He wore a custom navy suit that fit him like it was painted on. But his expression was completely unreadable, cool and distant, like he was attending a business meeting rather than his own wedding. When Rebecca reached the altar, Jonathan gave her the briefest of nods. No smile, no warmth, just polite acknowledgement. The ceremony proceeded with mechanical precision. The officiant, Judge Warren, a family friend of the Pierces, went through the traditional vows. Rebecca's voice wavered slightly when she said, "I do," but Jonathan's response was firm and steady, devoid of emotion. When it came time to exchange rings, Jonathan slid a stunning diamond band onto her finger without meeting her eyes. His hands were warm, but his touch was impersonal, as if he was signing a contract rather than making a lifetime commitment. "You may kiss the bride," Judge Warren announced. Jonathan leaned in, and Rebecca closed her eyes, her heart pounding. The kiss was brief, barely a touch of lips, cold and perfunctory. Nothing like the passionate first kiss she had always imagined. The guests applauded politely. But Rebecca felt emptiness spreading through her chest. The reception of strangers. The reception was even more uncomfortable. Rebecca sat at the head table beside Jonathan, smiling for photographs while feeling completely alone. Jonathan spent most of the evening networking with his business associates, barely speaking to her beyond what was necessary for appearances. "Your husband is quite the catch," said Veronica Ashford, one of the society women who approached Rebecca during dinner. Her smile was sharp and knowing. "Though I must say, this marriage came as quite a surprise. You two kept your relationship very private. We value our privacy, Rebecca replied carefully. The rehearsed answer she and Jonathan had agreed upon. How romantic, Veronica said, though her tone suggested she didn't believe a word. And how did you meet? Through family friends, Rebecca said, which was technically true. When Veronica finally moved away, Rebecca felt exhausted from maintaining the facade. She glanced at Jonathan, who was deep in conversation with a group of investors, laughing at something one of them said. He seemed completely at ease, as if getting married was just another item checked off his to-do list. The awkward beginning as the reception wound down. Jonathan finally turned to Rebecca. We should leave soon, he said quietly. The car is waiting, Rebecca nodded, relieved that the performance was almost over. They said their goodbyes, endured the traditional throwing of the bouquet, which was caught by one of Jonathan's cousins, and finally escaped to the waiting limousine. The moment the car door closed, sealing them in privacy, the pretense dropped. Jonathan loosened his tie and pulled out his phone, immediately checking emails. Rebecca sat on the opposite side of the spacious back seat, suddenly feeling very small in her elaborate wedding dress. Where are we going? She asked her first real question to her new husband. My penthouse in Tribeca, Jonathan replied without looking up from his phone. Your things have already been moved there. You'll have your own bedroom in the east wing. I'm in the west wing. We won't be in each other's way. The casual way he described their living arrangement, separate bedrooms, in separate wings, felt like a punch to the gut. Rebecca had known this was a business arrangement, but hearing it stated so bluntly made it painfully real. I see, she said softly. Jonathan finally looked at her, and for just a moment, something flickered in his green eyes. Guilt, maybe? Or discomfort? But it was gone so quickly Rebecca wondered if she had imagined it. Look, he said, his voice slightly gentler. I know this situation is unusual, but we both know what this is. You needed financial help, and I needed a wife for appearances. Let's just try to make this as painless as possible for both of us. Painless, Rebecca repeated, the word tasting bitter. Right. They spent the rest of the drive in silence. Rebecca looked out the window at the glittering lights of New York City, wondering what she had gotten herself into. A gilded cage, Jonathan's penthouse was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Manhattan skyline. The interior was all modern luxury, marble floors, designer furniture, contemporary art on the walls. It was beautiful and cold, just like its owner. Mrs. Chen is the housekeeper, Jonathan said, introducing an older Chinese woman who greeted them warmly. She'll help you get settled. If you need anything, ask her. Da! Welcome, Mrs. Pierce, Mrs. Chen said with a genuine smile. It was the first warmth Rebecca had felt all day. Jonathan showed Rebecca to her bedroom, spacious suite, with its own bathroom and sitting area. I have an early meeting tomorrow, he said from the doorway. I'll probably be gone before you wake up. Mrs. Chen will make sure you have breakfast. Okay, Rebecca said, suddenly feeling very tired. Jonathan hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something else. But instead, he just nodded. Good night, Rebecca. Good night. He closed the door, and Rebecca was finally alone. She sank onto the bed, still in her wedding dress, and allowed herself to cry for the first time that day. She cried for the romantic wedding she would never have, for the love story that didn't exist, for the stranger she had just married. But as her tears dried, Rebecca made a decision. She might be trapped in this arrangement, but she wouldn't let it break her. She would find a way to survive this, to maintain her dignity and her sense of self. Jonathan Pierce might have bought her presence, but he hadn't bought her spirit. Little did she know that her new husband, lying awake in his own bedroom on the other side of the penthouse, was having similar thoughts. Jonathan stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the image of Rebecca's sad brown eyes during the ceremony. He had told himself this was just business, that feelings wouldn't be involved. But something about the way she had looked in that wedding dress, vulnerable and brave at the same time, had stirred something in him he thought was long dead. He pushed the thought away. He couldn't afford emotions. Not again. Not after what Amanda Wilson had done to him. But his sleep finally claimed him. Jonathan's last thought was of Rebecca's trembling hands as she said her vows, and he felt an unfamiliar twist of guilt in his chest. Strangers in Paradise. The morning after the wedding, Rebecca woke up alone in the enormous bed, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a brief, disoriented moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. She was married to a stranger. In a penthouse in New York City, she found a note on the bedside table in neat handwriting. "Gone to the office. Mrs. Chen will help with anything you need. Jonathan." No good morning, no hope you slept well, just cold, efficient communication. Rebecca crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Mrs. Chen prepared a beautiful breakfast of fresh fruit, pastries, and coffee. "Mr. Pierce said to tell you that you should rest today," the housekeeper said kindly. "Tomorrow, you both leave for the Hamptons. He has a house there for the honeymoon." The word felt absurd given the circumstances. Rebecca spent the day exploring the penthouse. It felt more like a museum than a home. Everything was expensive and perfectly arranged. But there were no personal touches, no photographs, no signs that a real human being actually lived here. It was as sterile as their marriage, the Hampton estate, the next morning. A driver took them to the Hamptons in uncomfortable silence. Jonathan sat beside her in the back of the Mercedes, working on his laptop the entire 2-hour drive. Rebecca watched the city give way to suburbs, then to the beautiful coastal landscape of eastern Long Island. The house in the Hamptons turned out to be a massive estate right on the beach. White columns, manicured gardens, and a private stretch of sand that seemed to go on forever. It was stunning and completely intimidating. "This is where you grew up?" Rebecca asked, breaking the silence for the first time in hours. "Summers," Jonathan replied shortly. "My parents bought it when I was 10. They're gone now." There was something in his voice, a hint of pain that made Rebecca look at him more closely. But his expression remained carefully neutral as he grabbed their bags from the trunk. The inside of the estate was warmer than the Tribeca penthouse. There were family photos on the walls, comfortable furniture, books on shelves. It actually looked like a home. "I'll show you to your room," Jonathan said, leading her upstairs. "Separate rooms here too?" Rebecca couldn't help the edge in her voice. Jonathan stopped on the staircase and turned to face her. "What did you expect, Rebecca? That we'd pretend to be a real couple when no one is watching?" "I don't know what I expected," she said honestly. "But I didn't expect to feel this lonely while married." Something flickered across Jonathan's face, but he quickly masked it. "Your room is down the hall. Mine is at the end. Dinner's at 7. Mrs. Chen's sister, Helen, is the housekeeper here. She's an excellent cook." He walked away before Rebecca could respond. Walls beginning to crack. The first 3 days in the Hamptons followed the same pattern. Jonathan would disappear after breakfast, sometimes to his home office, sometimes for long walks on the beach alone. Rebecca explored the estate, read books from the library, and tried to ignore the ache of isolation. On the 4th evening, a storm rolled in from the ocean. Thunder rumbled and rain lashed against the windows. Rebecca was in the library, curled up with a novel, when the lights flickered and went out. "Rebecca," Jonathan's voice called from somewhere in the darkness. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she called back. "I'm in the library." A flashlight beam appeared and Jonathan entered carrying candles. In the soft, flickering light, he looked different somehow. Less guarded. More human. "Power goes out sometimes during storms," he explained, setting candles around the room. "It should come back in an hour or so," Rebecca said, watching him move around the room. He was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, more casual than she'd ever seen him. Jonathan settled into the chair across from her, and for a long moment they just sat in the candlelit silence, listening to the storm rage outside. "I'm sorry," Jonathan said suddenly. Rebecca looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For being cold. For treating you like a business transaction." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed almost vulnerable. "You didn't deserve that. You've been nothing but gracious about this whole situation, and I've been cruel. Why did you agree to this?" Rebecca asked softly. "To an arranged marriage? You could have just hired someone to pretend to be your girlfriend for business events." Jonathan was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. 2 years ago, I was engaged to a woman named Amanda Wilson. I thought I knew her. I thought we were building a life together." He paused, and Rebecca waited, sensing he needed to tell this story at his own pace. "I found out she was having an affair with my business partner, Scott Henderson, for over a year, right under my nose. When I confronted them, Amanda laughed. She told me she had never loved me, that she was only with me for my money and connections. Scott had been using our relationship to steal client information, to undermine deals, to sabotage the company from the inside." Rebecca's heart ached at the pain in his voice. "The betrayal almost destroyed me," Jonathan continued. "Not just emotionally, but professionally. Investors lost faith. Deals fell through. My reputation took a massive hit. It took me 2 years to rebuild everything. And in that time, I swore I would never let anyone close enough to hurt me again." "So you decided on an arrangement where feelings wouldn't be involved?" Rebecca said, understanding dawning. "Exactly. A marriage that was honest about what it was from the start. No lies, no betrayal, no heartbreak." He looked at her directly for the first time. "But I didn't count on you being so kind, so patient, so real. The question that changed everything. The storm intensified, and the temperature in the house dropped." Jonathan built a fire in the library fireplace, and they moved closer to its warmth. The conversation flowed more easily now, the walls between them beginning to crumble. Rebecca told him about her family, about growing up in Boston, about her love of teaching literature to high school students. Jonathan talked about his childhood, about losing his parents in a car accident when he was 25, about building his business from the ground up. "I can't imagine losing both parents at once," Rebecca said softly. "It was the hardest thing I've ever been through," Jonathan admitted. "Until Amanda. That betrayal somehow hurt even more because I chose to trust her. I chose to be vulnerable. And she destroyed me for it." "Not everyone is like her," Rebecca said gently. "I know that logically," Jonathan replied. "But knowing it and believing it are two different things." They talked long into the night, and Rebecca saw glimpses of the man behind the cold facade. He was funny, making her laugh with stories about disastrous business meetings. He was thoughtful, remembering small details about things she had mentioned. He was lonely, just like her. Around midnight, the rain softened to a gentle patter. The fire had burned down 2 glowing embers, casting dancing shadows on the walls. They had moved closer together as the night progressed, until they were sitting side by side on the couch, their shoulders almost touching. "Rebecca," Jonathan said quietly, turning to face her. In the dim light, his eyes were darker, more intense. "Can I be honest with you?" "Please," she whispered. "I've been trying so hard to keep distance between us, to maintain the boundaries of our arrangement. But tonight, talking with you, being near you, I realize I'm fighting something I'm not sure I want to fight anymore." Rebecca's heart began to race. "What are you fighting?" "This," Jonathan said simply. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "You." The touch sent electricity through Rebecca's body. She had told herself not to develop feelings for him, to protect her heart, to remember this was just business. But sitting here with him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, feeling the gentle warmth of his hand on her face, all her defenses crumbled. "I've been fighting it too," she admitted. "From the moment I saw you at the altar, I've been trying to convince myself this is just an arrangement. But it doesn't feel like just an arrangement anymore." Jonathan leaned closer, his eyes searching her face. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his lips inches from hers. "Tell me you want to keep this professional, and I'll respect that. I'll go back to my room, and we'll pretend this conversation never happened." Rebecca's mind raced. This was dangerous territory. If she let this happen, if she let herself feel something real for him, she was risking her heart in a situation that had an expiration date. But looking into his eyes, seeing the same longing she felt reflected back at her, she couldn't bring herself to say no. "I don't want you to stop," she breathed. "Can I go on?" Jonathan asked, the question hanging in the air between them, weighted with meaning far beyond the simple words. "Yes," Rebecca whispered. The night everything changed, Jonathan kissed her then. And it was nothing like the cold, perfunctory kiss at their wedding. This kiss was warm, deep, and full of all the longing they had both been suppressing. Rebecca melted into him, her hands moving to his shoulders, pulling him closer. He responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her waist, holding her like she was something precious. The kiss deepened, and Rebecca felt like she was on fire. Every nerve ending alive with sensation when they finally broke apart. Both breathing heavily, Jonathan rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably ask what you want to happen next," he said, his voice rough. "Take me upstairs," Rebecca said, her decision made. She wanted this, wanted him. Whatever the consequences, in this moment, she was choosing to feel something real. Jonathan stood and extended his hand. Rebecca took it, and he led her up the grand staircase, not to her room or his, but to the master bedroom at the center of the house. It was a beautiful space with a massive four-poster bed and windows overlooking the ocean. He lit candles around the room, bathing everything in soft golden light. Then he turned to her, his eyes dark with desire but also with something else, tenderness. "I need you to know something," Jonathan said, cupping her face in his hands. "I haven't been with anyone since Amanda. I haven't wanted to be. Until you." "I need you to know something too," Rebecca said, her cheeks flushing. "I've never been with anyone at all." Jonathan's eyes widened. "You're a virgin?" She nodded, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "I always thought I'd wait for someone special. Someone I had real feelings for. And I know this situation is complicated. But Jonathan, I have real feelings for you." "I have real feelings for you too," he admitted. "I've been terrified of them, but they're there. And Rebecca, if you want to wait, if you want this to be special, we can wait." "This is special," she said firmly. "You're special to me. I don't want to wait." Jonathan kissed her again, gentler this time, reverent. He undressed her slowly, his hands careful and tender, making her feel beautiful and cherished. When they finally came together, he was patient and attentive, asking her constantly if she was okay, if she wanted to continue. "Can I go on?" He whispered against her skin again and again, and each time Rebecca answered yes, surrendering herself completely to the moment, to him, to the feelings she could no longer deny. Morning after, Rebecca woke, wrapped in Jonathan's arms. Morning sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment, she felt pure contentment. Then reality set in. What had they done? They had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, turned their business arrangement into something real and messy and complicated. She felt Jonathan stir beside her. He opened his eyes and smiled at her, a genuine, warm smile she had never seen before. "Good morning," he said softly, pulling her closer. "Good morning," she replied, though anxiety twisted in her stomach. Jonathan seemed to sense her worry. He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her seriously. "I know what you're thinking," he said. "You're wondering if last night was a mistake. Was it?" Rebecca asked. "No," Jonathan said firmly. "Rebecca, I've spent 2 years building walls around my heart. I thought I needed those walls to survive. But you've shown me that surviving isn't the same as living. Last night, for the first time in years, I felt alive." "I felt it too," Rebecca admitted. "But Jonathan, we have to be realistic. Our marriage has an end date. This arrangement was supposed to last 2 years, then we'd divorce. What happens now?" Jonathan was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that made Rebecca's heart skip. "What if we tear up the contract? What if we try to build something real instead?" "Are you serious?" she whispered. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "The idea of being vulnerable again, of trusting someone completely, it scares me to death. But the idea of letting you go scares me even more." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "I want to try," she said. "I want to build something real with you." They spent the next week in the Hamptons, not as strangers bound by contract, but as two people genuinely getting to know each other and falling in love. They walked on the beach, cooked meals together, talked for hours about everything and nothing. Jonathan opened up about his dreams, his fears, his hopes. Rebecca shared her own vulnerabilities, her own desires for the future. When they returned to New York, they moved into the same bedroom. No more separate wings. No more distance. They were building a real marriage, and it felt right. Rebecca went back to her teaching job at a private school in Manhattan, something Jonathan fully supported. This arrangement was never about you giving up your life, he said. If anything, I want to support your dreams. For 3 months, they were happy. They attended charity events together, not as business partners, but as a couple, genuinely in love. Jonathan's friends and associates noticed the change in him. He smiled more, laughed more, seemed lighter somehow. Rebecca's family was overjoyed. Her mother cried happy tears when she saw how Jonathan looked at her daughter. He loves you, Patricia said. Really loves you. Then Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. The unexpected news: she took the test 3 times, unable to believe it. But each time the result was the same. Positive. She was carrying Jonathan's child. Fear and joy warred within her. They had only just begun to build a real relationship. Was it too soon for a baby? Would Jonathan want this? That evening, when Jonathan came home from work, Rebecca was sitting in the living room, her hands shaking. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, sitting beside her. "You look pale." "I have something to tell you," Rebecca said, her voice trembling. "And I don't know how you're going to react." "You're scaring me," Jonathan said, taking her hands. "Whatever it is, we'll deal with it together." "I'm pregnant," Rebecca blurted out. Jonathan froze. For a long moment he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "We're having a baby?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "Yes," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "Are you happy?" "Happy?" Jonathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Rebecca, I'm beyond happy. I'm ecstatic. We're going to be parents." They held each other, both crying and laughing at the same time. In that moment, Rebecca knew everything would be okay. The storm returns 2 weeks later. Jonathan came home early from work, his face troubled. "We need to talk," he said. Rebecca's stomach dropped. Those 4 words were never good. "Amanda is back in New York," Jonathan said. "She called my office today. She wants to meet." "Why?" Rebecca asked, dread pooling in her gut. "She says she made a mistake. That she wants me back. That she's changed." Jonathan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Rebecca now recognized as stress. "I told her no, obviously. I'm married. I'm happy." But she wouldn't take no for an answer. "She said she's going to fight for me." "Let her fight," Rebecca said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "She can't come between us unless we let her." But Amanda Wilson was not a woman who accepted defeat easily. Over the next weeks, she launched a campaign to destroy Rebecca and Jonathan's marriage. She showed up at Jonathan's office, at their favorite restaurants, at charity events. She was always perfectly dressed, perfectly poised, reminding everyone of what a power couple she and Jonathan had once been. She spread rumors through their social circle. She suggested that Rebecca had trapped Jonathan with a pregnancy, that Rebecca was only with him for money, that their entire marriage was a sham. The constant pressure began to take its toll. Jonathan became stressed and withdrawn, the old walls starting to rebuild themselves. Rebecca tried to be understanding, but she was hormonal and emotional from the pregnancy. And Amanda's poisonous whispers were getting to her too. The moment of doubt, the breaking point, came at a gala fundraiser for one of Jonathan's business initiatives. Rebecca was 5 months pregnant, her belly clearly showing. She wore a beautiful maternity gown, but next to Amanda, who showed up uninvited in a stunning red dress, Rebecca felt frumpy and insecure. Amanda cornered Jonathan while Rebecca was in the restroom. When Rebecca came out, she saw them talking, Amanda's hand on Jonathan's arm, leaning in close. Jonathan didn't push her away immediately, and that moment of hesitation shattered something inside Rebecca. Then Amanda showed everyone on her phone what appeared to be old photos of her and Jonathan together, looking happy and in love. "These were taken just 6 months ago," Amanda announced loudly enough for people nearby to hear. Before he rushed into this rebound marriage, Rebecca knew they had to be fake, probably old photos with altered dates. But seeing Jonathan in those pictures with Amanda, remembering that he had once loved this woman enough to propose, doubt crept in. What if Jonathan still had feelings for Amanda? What if Rebecca had been right to worry that this had all happened too fast? What if he regretted choosing her? That night, in the car ride home, the tension was suffocating. "Those photos were old," Jonathan said. "She's lying about when they were taken." "I know," Rebecca said quietly. "Then why are you upset?" "Because you hesitated," Rebecca said, turning to look at him. "When she touched you tonight, you didn't push her away immediately. You hesitated. And in that moment, I saw doubt in your eyes." "I didn't," Jonathan protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Don't lie to me," Rebecca said, her voice breaking. "Not after everything we've been through." Jonathan was silent, and that silence was damning. "Pull over," Rebecca said. "What?" "Pull over, Jonathan. Now." He pulled the car to the side of the road. Rebecca took off her wedding ring and placed it in the cup holder. "I can't do this," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I can't be with someone who doubts me, who doubts us. I've given you everything. My heart, my trust, my complete faith. And you can't give me the same in return." "Rebecca, please," Jonathan said, panic in his voice. "Don't do this." "Take me to my parents' house," Rebecca said. "I need space to think." The fight for love. Rebecca spent 3 days at her parents' house, crying and trying to figure out what to do. Jonathan called constantly, but she didn't answer. She needed to process, to decide if she could really spend her life with someone who still let his ex-fiancée have power over him. On the 4th day, there was a knock at the door. Rebecca opened it to find Jonathan standing there looking haggard. He had dark circles under his eyes, his clothes were wrinkled, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I've been an idiot," he said without preamble. "The biggest idiot in the world. Can I come in?" Rebecca hesitated, then stepped aside. Jonathan walked into the living room, but didn't sit. Instead, he began to pace. "You were right," he said. "I did hesitate. And do you know why? Because for just a second, I was back in that moment 2 years ago when I found out about Amanda's affair. I was back in that pain, that betrayal, and old instincts kicked in. The instinct to protect myself, to not trust, to always expect the worst." He stopped pacing and looked at Rebecca directly. "But here's what I realized over the last 3 days without you. That moment of doubt had nothing to do with you and everything to do with my own fear. You have never given me a single reason not to trust you. You've been honest, loyal, loving, and patient with me even when I didn't deserve it." "Jonathan," Rebecca started, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish. I went to see Amanda yesterday. I told her that she needs to leave us alone. That I don't love her, that I never really loved her because what we had was superficial. I told her that you are my wife, the mother of my child, and the love of my life. And if she ever tries to interfere in our marriage again, I'll pursue legal action for harassment." "Ah!" Rebecca felt her heart swell. "You did that?" "I did. And I did something else too." Jonathan pulled out a folder from his bag. "I hired a private investigator to look into those photos Amanda showed everyone. They were fake, taken from our engagement 2 years ago, and the dates digitally altered. The investigator has proof. Amanda was lying about everything." He handed Rebecca the folder. And she saw the evidence, the original photos with their real dates. The metadata showing manipulation, the whole truth laid bare. "I'm going to make sure everyone at that gala knows she lied," Jonathan continued. "I'm going to protect your reputation and our family's name. But more importantly, I want you to know that I choose you. Every single day, I choose you. My past with Amanda is dead and buried. You are my present and my future." Rebecca stood up, tears streaming down her face. "I choose you too," she whispered. "I was scared, but I never stopped loving you." Jonathan crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "Can I go on?" He asked the question that had become their private vow. "Can I spend the rest of my life showing you how much I love you?" "Yes," Rebecca said, kissing him deeply. "Always, yes." The final victory. Jonathan kept his promise. He released the evidence of Amanda's fabricated photos to their social circle and threatened legal action. Amanda, faced with the truth and potential lawsuits, finally retreated. She left New York, and they never heard from her again. 3 months later, Rebecca gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Grace because that's what their love had been. A grace neither of them deserved, but both were grateful for, as Jonathan held his daughter for the first time. Tears streaming down his face, he looked at Rebecca and said, "Thank you." "For what?" Rebecca asked, exhausted but glowing. "For teaching me how to trust again. For showing me that real love exists. For giving me a family. For everything." Rebecca smiled. "We taught each other," she said. "You showed me strength. You gave my family security. You proved that sometimes the most unexpected arrangements can lead to the greatest love stories." They sat together in the hospital room, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them, and knew that they had built something real and lasting. What had started as a cold business transaction had transformed into a marriage based on genuine love, trust, and commitment. Years later, when people asked them how they made their marriage work, Jonathan would always smile and say, "I asked her if I could go on, and she said yes. And she keeps saying yes every single day." And Rebecca would add, "Our wedding night was when everything changed. It was the night we stopped pretending and started living. It was the night I fell asleep in his arms and never wanted to wake up because the dream was finally better than anything reality had offered before." Their love story had started with doubt and distance, but it ended with devotion and forever. And that made all the difference.